Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CS School podcast, brought to you by Customer Success Collective. My name's Grace Gupta. I'm the content lead at CSC and the host of this podcast. And you're in for a real treat with this episode, as I'm joined by Alex Turkovic, Director of Adoption Programs at Snow Software. And we're going to be talking all about demystifying digital customer success. We've got a fellow podcaster on our pod. No pressure here. Alex is the host of an exceptional podcast, the Digital Customer Success Podcast, where he explores the aspects of world-class digital CX. If you haven't already listened, do go and check it out. You're in for a real treat. But for now, let's hear it from the man himself, and let's dive right into this episode. Hey, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me on the CS School podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the episode. How are you doing?
It's great to have you. Great to be here. Wrong sentence. See, I'm used to saying that because I'm a podcast myself. And so it's like, this is a role reversal. So it's super cool. I'm doing well, thank you. And I am chuffed to bits to be here, as you say.
Oh, exactly. Very, very British saying. No, absolutely. No, I'm absolutely chuffed to have you. It's really exciting, especially as I don't think I've ever had anybody on the podcast before who also hosts their own podcast. So I think I've got a sneaking suspicion we're in for a good one today. No pressure.
Let's hope so. Knock on wood.
No, but I'm really excited to have you on because we are talking about your podcast, the Digital Customer Success Podcast. And I think it would be really amiss to this episode not to be talking about digital customer success. So that is what we're doing. We're going to be demystifying digital customer success. And I think we're going to go into loads. And I think any listeners will have just a vast array of takeaways for them. So, but before we get started.
Let's hope so.
Oh, no, I'm sure. Before we get started, though, I'd really, I think for any listeners who perhaps don't know who you are, could you explain your role at Snow Software and, your customer success career today and, a little bit about your own podcast?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been leading the digital customer success and customer education function at Snow Software for going on 3 years, 2.5 years or so. And it's interesting because in that time, we've seen kind of the definition of digital CS morph a little bit. So it's been fun to have a front row seat to that. Prior to that, I first cut my teeth in the music industry, believe it or not. I was an audio engineer for a while and made records in Nashville. Sounds way better than it is. I spent a lot of time in learning development, customer facing education, professional services, leadership roles, and just kind of, I'm a little bit of a mutt, I suppose you could say. The digital CS realm was a perfect marriage for me of all the things that I liked about enablement and helping people to do things better than they did the day before. And just kind of like the technical aspects of it and the automation aspects of it. So it's a good marriage for me. And I guess 6, 7, 8 months ago, I started the Digital CS podcast. It's been great. It's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, a really varied background by the sounds of it. The music industry, I don't want to linger on that too much, but tell me a little bit more about that.
I mean, for the first 25 years of my life, I was like, hey, I'm a musician. I do this for a living.
Oh, amazing.
Most musicians don't do it for a living, and I didn't either. But I went to music school. I was a drummer and percussionist, and I studied audio engineering, and then lived in Nashville for a few years, where worked in various studios, and that's also where I met my wife, and she was in the industry, and we both kind of got sick of it around the same time and decided to exit. So.
Oh no! Such an interesting background. I just love talking to CS folks and hearing about the diverse and just the sheer variety in backgrounds.
Yeah,
I love it.
There's nobody who has a straight line into CS unless you're like super young and just getting into
the thing. Absolutely.
Pro life now.
No, I completely agree. Well, I think shall we dive right in, because I think talking about digital customer success, when we were discussing the possibilities for this episode, I've done a lot of research about it. I think it's viewed as like slightly complex. And there are lots of misconceptions about what it is, and what it isn't. So Alex, would you be able to I think just to kick this episode off properly and start on a nice even keel, could you perhaps explain to me and the listeners why there is a perception that digital CS is really complicated, and kind of, I guess, the work you're doing at Snow Software and the conversations you might have had on your own podcast, how we're going about to demystify it?
It is a bit of a black box. Like, a lot of people assign the term of digital CS to something that is like automatically going to solve a bunch of problems that you have in your customer journey, and it's like this thing you install and are done with. And I'm glad that that's kind of changing a little bit now, where you're getting into a little bit more of the detail of what digital CS actually is in the industry. And put very simply, it is about engaging a customer at the right time and the right persona at the right time to help customers along their customer journey and get to their outcomes. And it's also about, what kind of internal efficiencies that you can build into your team and to make your CSMs more effective and those kinds of things. So, in a lot of ways, digital CS is nothing more than just, a part of your overall strategy to get your customers on the right path, whether it's with a CSM and a one-to-one relationship, or email campaigns, or in-app guidance, or whatever it is. Like, it's all just part of the strategy of helping your customers, succeed. So a lot of people really try to overcomplicate it, but at the end of the day, guess what? If you're doing an email campaign, you're doing digital CS. If you've built a template out for your QBR, I guess you could consider that as digital CS. And that's also where the overlap between like digital CS and like operations exists a lot, because a lot of CS operations people are digital CS people.
No, it's fascinating. Thank you so much, Felix. Yeah, that really helps to sort of put it in perspective, I guess. And I think when we're talking about digital CS, and like you mentioned, all the different facets, like whether you're building an email campaign, etc., there are lots of, I guess in today's world, there are lots of digital tools which are enable CSMs to really hit, really get at reach as many customers as possible. And, in terms of scaling, there's an incredible amount of resources out there. But I guess my question is, and this is something that I think I end up talking about quite a lot when I speak to CS professionals and when I'm reading about customer success, is this balance between this sort of human element of customer success, which is undeniable. You're an empath, you're incredible at customer relationship management. And I guess the other side, which is you really need to be able to be incredibly strong with your data analysis. You need to be able to use these tech, it's not one or the other. So when I speak to CSMs, there's a huge, one thing that comes up a lot is there's like trying to work out this balance. And I'm quite curious to know whether you see it as like a 50-50 balance, or whether you see it as, or really actually, and that's maybe not that question, but maybe more so, what tools do you think are effective in kind of harmonizing, balancing? That was a
harmonizing.
There we go. I still don't think I said it then. Creating that balance between the sort of tech and human sides of customer success, which are obviously so crucial, like you said, to digital CS strategies.
I've given this a lot of thought, obviously, hopefully. And it's an interesting thing, because I think there still exists this notion that it's either or. And I don't think that is necessarily the best way to look at it, because I think any good digital strategy is going to have a human associated with it at some point, and vice versa. I think any good human or CSM strategy should have some element of digital included in it, because at the end of the day, we want to help our customers in the most efficient straight line path possible, And so if you look at a digital motion, one example I use a lot is like your survey, post survey response strategy, where, a lot of surveys have a splash page at the end, maybe an acknowledgement email that goes out afterwards. That's great. That's a pure 100% digital strategy, right? My opinion is, if you're going to do a survey and you're going to ask your customers for feedback, you should respond to those customers with an actual human, whether that is an email, whether that's a phone call or something like that, acknowledging the feedback, whether positive or negative. And so I think that is one example of where, your digital strategy helps you kind of to remove the mundane, like the everyday activities, the click and repeat activities that you don't want your CSMs doing, and then focuses your CSMs or whoever's responding on those high value, conversations. And I think that is where a successful digital strategy works the best, is where, you're not only helping your customers with some digital engagement, but you're helping your CSMs to be as effective and as human as possible without, having to send the same email 50 times.
Oh, that's so interesting to me, because I hadn't really had it framed in that way before. Like, from what you're saying, it sounds like that's the sort of tech touch aspect, the digital aspect is really all about enablement, and enablement of customer success teams rather than one or the other. I think you're right, because there is a danger, I think, of people just looking at things in too much of a binary way. Like, it is 50% this, 50% that, and it's much more, by the way you're saying, it's much more interconnected.
It's a big part of it. I think, sure, there are things that can be 100% digital, and there are things that should be 100% digital. But, where you identify those points along your customer journey where it is imperative that a human reaches out, let's say logins plummet, or celebrating successes. A user does something that is that we know is a positive activity in your product. There's no reason why we can't celebrate those things as well. We tend to focus our digital strategy on like intervention and alerting when something goes wrong, but I think we should also do a lot of like alerting around things that go right.
No, absolutely. That sounds absolutely spot on. And I think particularly as we're recording this at the end of 2023, this year has been, automation and sort of generative AI have been all anyone can talk about. And that's whenever I speak to people at sort of the end of the year, and I've been to events and I chat to people, what do you think are the big trends? It's going to be, and it's always AI. I'm quite keen to know, with the introduction of automation's been going around for ages, but more and more we're seeing more and more processes in all departments, whether it's sales, marketing, but specifically we're talking about CS. With the introduction of these processes, so customer success as we know it is evolving. Like, if you were to look at customer success back in 2013, it probably looked very different from how it is today. So I'm quite keen to know, how do you think, especially as someone in your position, at your role, and you also talk to loads of customer success professionals of all different, seniority. I'm quite keen to know your insights on how these technological advancements, how you've seen them to transform the field, particularly in the last few years.
I mean, look, generative AI is all over the place, right? And a lot of people like tune out as soon as that topic comes up, just because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But there's no kind of, turning away from it. There's the fact is that a lot of really smart people are working really hard on generative AI platforms and solutions that are going to do some really amazing things. And I say going to because I don't think I don't think we're using it effectively. I don't think we're thinking about it effectively on mass right now. I think the basic use cases are starting to creep in. So, for instance, meeting summaries and account summaries and those kinds of things are excellent uses of generative AI. And there's a lot of platforms like, Gainsight has started to launch some AI features, or, you've got our friends at Update AI, which are, doing some great things in terms of, meeting summaries and data around that. But I think we're just scratching the surface. I think, the other thing too is I am keenly aware that there's this perception, especially among CSMs, where, the perception is like, hey, this stuff is going to, take my job, and this stuff is going to like replace me at some point. And I'm sorry if you spent any time on, Chat GPT or whatever, and you read some of the outputs that are there, I don't trust putting a generative AI bot in front of a customer unless I specifically say, hey, look, this is a bot. If you want to talk to, you can still talk to a human if you want to, right? But that said, I think generative AI is, at least right now and in the near future, the ultimate deflection point. And I think that's really where the power of it lies in the next year or so, which is to say that, the things that you're answering 20 times a day, let's have generative AI take those things. Let's incorporate that more into our tech stack. But then also use it internally to give you a rundown of what a customer has been engaging with. Have they been engaging with certain bits of content on your community, or taken certain courses in your LMS? What have they chatted with the bot about? Give you a summary of that so that you can go into your next customer conversation and say, hey, look, you might be struggling with XYZ. How can I help you? That's where the tools like that are going to, again, bolster the human, and make it to where you as a CSM can have those like super human and effective and value add conversations that you don't, where today, where you might not even know that stuff is happening with your customer.
No, thank you so much for that, because I think, like you said, I think it boils down to enablement and really making the best use of your time and not relying on it wholly. Because also the point where you said about putting like a chatbot in front of the customer, and it's like you said, ChatGPT is unreliable. Some of the stuff comes out is actually like,
it's amazing how like confident it sounds too. Like it's like I've had it give me blatantly wrong information in the most confident and authoritarian tone
the audacity
ever, and I'm
like, no, honestly, completely agree. But again, like I've spoken to quite a few people at our customer success festival in London, and there are people talking about the eventual case of actual like sort of virtual CSMs that are all done by AI. But again, to get to a point, obviously they'd have to go through vigorous tests, but to get to a point to do that, it has to be absolutely, completely faultless. Because imagine like breaking down all that trust. You take the amount of time it takes to build up trust with a customer, and then something really sloppy. I don't know. I feel like there's reason to be cautious. But
yeah, I mean, look, so Cast App is an amazing example of a technology that exists right now, and that I'm actually a huge fan of. It is basically a digital customer success manager, but it bills itself as a digital customer success manager in that it is virtual. It's obvious that it's virtual. There's no human behind it. And I think it's okay if you present those kinds of things to your customers, because they do present a massive amount of value. I think where you run into issues is like, trying to gaslight as a real human, but you're not a real human. That's where it's like not cool.
Yeah, that's when the ethics of it gets slightly murky, and you kind of really run the risk of destabilizing all of the good work, not even just this customer success team's good work, but everything that's been done, marketing, sales, but yeah, so shifting focus slightly. I kind of wanted to sort of think about what I like to do in the podcast is sort of think about actually really actionable things that CSMs can take away. So think about sort of individual contributors or customer success managers, particularly in smaller organizations. What advice would you give to them about incorporating sort of digital tools into their workflow to almost like best enablement practices?
Yeah, I love this topic because it is often overlooked. It is like, back to our earlier point, it's like, do you have somebody doing digital and ops or do you not? And I don't think that's the point. I think the point is like, how are your CSMs thinking about things, and what is the CSM doing on a daily basis that maybe they shouldn't be doing? Because I think any leader will pinpoint those things, for like a digital program. But to your actual question about the CSM's individual involvement in digital strategy, again, if you've built a template, that's essentially digital. If you've got some email templates that you're working on, I think that is digital. And I think that one of the things where CSMs can really band together and help each other is, hey, look, I've got this thing that I send to my customer all the time and it works really well. And kind of that knowledge, best practice sharing across teams is absolutely vital. And in the absence of somebody owning those things, I think, CSMs can really take those things and help each other build efficiencies throughout their processes. I think another one too, again, in the absence of a larger org where you have an ops function, is, really try and partner with your marketing teams, and your product teams, because at the end of the day, they are also communicating with customers in one way or another. And they might have a mechanism to do some of the things that you might not have a mechanism to do, and vice versa. So I think, for smaller teams, it should theoretically be a lot easier to work cross-functionally and to kind of partner around some of these flows. Because if you don't have, a customer success platform or any kind of automation platform, guess what your marketing org does? Because marketing orgs do email automation all day, all night, So I think the big thing for a CSM is, especially in smaller orgs, is figure out what tools you have around you, figure out what free tools exist like Loom and all that kind of fun stuff, and just use those resources. It's goes into mindset around, hey, we can't do this, but what can we do?
No, look, honestly, when you said the fact that people ask about, do you have an ops role? Do you have an enablement role? I think I've definitely been guilty of talking about that before. But that's not the right question to be asking. It's actually it should be asking, what are people, how can CSMs do that, perform that function without,
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you do have an ops person, or if you do have a digital person, guess what? They're going to be your best friend if you feed them stuff like this. Firsthand experience. Like I get, the most valuable kind of flows and things that we've implemented at Snow have come from CSMs. Say, hey, like I'm doing this, it works really well. Can we automate it? Like, yes, we can.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think something I really wanted to pick your brains about, really, and so pick your brains is the wrong phrase because it's such a big topic, but this is when we talk about sort of digital CS, I think inevitably, we're going to be talking about sort of segmentation and sort of high touch and digital tools. And again, back to I think what we spoke about before, how CS isn't just one or the other between, the sort of human empathy side and the sort of tech side.
Right.
But when we talk about sort of your white glove clients, your high touch, the ones that have a dedicated CSM, the high value ones, and then you associate perhaps more tech touch with, your lower value customers, the ones that, things can be automated a bit more. That's kind of in the way that things have been positioned.
Sure.
But more and more, I'm hearing people talking about how to how to achieve sort of high touch at scale with digital tools. And I think it's a really thought-provoking take on the future of customer success. So I was quite curious, what kind of conversations you've had with, your colleagues and, peers, like what strategies you can sort of start for, particularly for, I guess, a team that haven't, would quite like to tackle this, but not entirely sure, like, what is the best way? How do I go about this to deliver that high touch customer service at scale?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting because we've definitely been on a journey as an industry when it comes to quote unquote digital or quote unquote tech touch. And, which is to say that a few years ago, it was very common to like have a strategy that was specific to a certain segment of customers because you didn't have a CSM engaged. And I know over the last, year or so that has evolved, especially, Gainsight at Pulse last year went hard on, digital is not a segment, is a strategy. And I think that's absolutely correct. But that's not to say that digital shouldn't incorporate strategy or incorporate segmentation, because at the end of the day, you're going to modify your digital kind of engagements based on, for instance, whether there's a CSM engaged or not, right? So one example I like to give here is your basic email flow. If you're sending some sort of, product update email or whatnot for customers that don't have a CSM engaged on the account, you're going to automatically send that. It's going to go out to your champions or your admins or whoever. And, hopefully some kind of mechanism for them to feedback. End of story. With a CSM engaged, though, what I like to do is program those things in a way to where the email actually goes out via the CSM, whether it's automated with the CSM signature on there and the return address on there, or, we might give the CSM an opportunity to take that email intended for that customer, modify it based on what they know about the customer and their information, that they have and the context that they have about the customer, and then send that email. But we're using that digital flow and injecting the human element into it. And everybody wins. Customer, gets a little bit more personalized communication. CSM wins because they didn't have to go write the email and they got prompted to do it and didn't have to remember to do it and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think to your question of kind of high touch at scale, sure, digital is going to help you, cover your kind of lower segments, your historically underserved segments, with more ease, but also to our earlier point, your digital strategy should help make that high touch engagement easier and more relevant. Full stop.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's I think it's going to be super useful for anyone listening. I also sort of drawing to a close a little bit, but this is something that I absolutely loved. That you published an article recently, and something I read before, but preparing for this episode. You refer to it as the digital customer success sweet spot. I'd love for you to tell our listeners more about this, and why do you believe it's crucial for a digital customer success program? This is something I love this. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. One of the problems with digital CS is that, and I've said this before in other places, but I think it is the one function that literally has the most variability of any other function, because you're dealing with data from all over the place and different tools and different customers and products and internal audience and external. Like the variables just go on and on and on and on. The reason why I bring that up is because it can be very hard to build a digital program in a templated fashion. In other words, you can't take a digital program that you built at company X and install it exactly the same at company Y, because the variables are all different. And so in thinking through that, it became obvious to me that, hey, look, there are some commonalities of a healthy digital program from a foundation level up. And to me, that's this digital CS sweet spot. We can link to the article or whatever, but essentially it is that sweet spot. And picture a Venn diagram with three circles, right? It's that combination between a well thought out customer journey, a healthy-ish data set. And I say healthy-ish because there is no such thing as a completely healthy data set, but you need to know who your customers are and, who your personas are and kind of, have the context around that in your data, combined with automation. If you have those three things relatively well laid out from a foundational perspective, then anything you build on top of that will benefit from really focusing on those three to begin with.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I will definitely link out to that article in the show notes because it's a fantastic read. And it was really great. Particularly the Venn diagram is a great visualizer for anyone wanting to know what that sweet spot is. So
you love a good Venn diagram, right?
Oh, they'll go nuts for it, Alex. Honestly. No, it's a real corker. Is that the right word? Anyway, well, before I stop blabbering around, but before
you almost made me spit out my water just now.
Oh no, I was going to save it for the blooper reel. But before we wrap up, I am so excited to announce this. But you are speaking at the upcoming Customer Success Festival in Austin it's February the 14th and 15th. Would you mind giving our listeners a sneak peek of what to expect from your sessions and why they should consider attending this event at all?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I love the collective events. Like they always seem to kind of hit the mark. And the fact that they're, so regionally distributed means that, you can have like that truly global influence and obviously love that it's in Austin because that's where I live and I only have to drive like 40 minutes to get there. That said, I'm going to be focused on a topic that we actually spoke about a little bit earlier, which is that magical combination of machine and human. So, combining your digital strategies with humans. And so spending a lot of time on kind of the foundations of that, but then also getting into like a lot of practical examples of what that looks like in the real world. So that hopefully, if you attend that session, it'll give you some insight into, things that you can go do to help your humans and your machines interact.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. I know it's going to be. I mean, particularly like I want to know more about that magical combination. So anyone who's slightly perhaps in the Austin area, and they themselves have been wondering, how to sort of navigate that. Get yourselves down to the Customer Success Festival. They're fantastic. I'm not just saying that. They are just genuine, and there's just a great bunch of people there as well. So yeah. Loads of networking opportunities. So, but yeah. Oh, I'm afraid we've run out of time, Alex. But it's been
we did well. Yeah.
We've done very well. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And can't wait to watch the footage of your session at Austin. It's going to be fantastic. But thank you. Yeah, your insights into digital CS are unparalleled. So, and I'm sure our listeners have got a lot from this. Our conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure, and it's always fun rapping about digital, so I could do it all day.
Oh no, we'll have to get you back onto the pod. You've been an absolute dream guest. Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out our other episodes and go to customersuccesscollective.com for even more customer success related content. You can also join our global community on Slack, and you can find the link to that on the CSC website. But until then, see you next time.